Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to this talk from the CSRC Colloquium. Today we have Professor Sandrine Rakotonarivo, who's giving a talk on model-based and data-based approaches for monitoring elastic structures using acoustics and ultrasounds. So Professor Sandrine received her master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Technology of Compiègne in France. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And her PhD degree in acoustics from University of Western Brittany, also in France, in 2009. In 2009, she joined the Marine Physical Laboratory of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UCSD as a postdoctoral fellow. And since September 2013, she has been an associate professor at Marseille University in France. She teaches in the mechanical engineering department of the Institute of Technology of Marseille University and conducts her research at the Laboratory of Mechanics and Acoustics in Marseille. She's currently on a sabbatical leave as an invited researcher at the Marine Physical Laboratory of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UCSD. So it's my pleasure to welcome you here, and the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm turning on my mic.
Yes, I'll turn this
Thank you for being here. I'm very happy to present my work. And so before starting my presentation, I would like to talk a little bit about my university and the laboratory where I come from. So it's in Marseille, in the southeast part of France, by the Mediterranean Sea. And among the main attractions in Marseille, you have the beaches, the soccer with a great team, the Olympique de Marseille, and the University of Aix-Marseille that has about 80,000 students and 8,000 staff, 17 faculties, 5 largest campuses spread around the Marseille area, and 122 research structures. And the Laboratory of Mechanics and Acoustics is part of these research structures. It's based in Marseille and has an antenna in Aix-en-Provence. We conduct basic research and applied research. We are about 129 people, and we have an exceptional set of platform and experimental research centers, and we have various academic and industrial partnerships at a national and international level. The main area of expertise of the lab, LMA, it goes from solid mechanics to acoustic, and it is organized in 3 research teams: the material and structures team that conduct theoretical study of solid media, experimental characterization, and establishment of behavioral model; then the sounds team that conducts research on audible sounds from the point of view of their production, control, and perception; and the waves and imaging team. I'm part of this team. We are studying mechanical wave propagation for the non-invasive imaging, characterization, or control of complex fluid and solid media. This research is conducted from micro scale to macro scale for biomedical ultrasound application, also for the study of wave propagation in microstructural materials, and for marine acoustic and seismic imaging, structural health monitoring, and non-destructive evaluation. And my research are within the last these last two topics. So what I'm dealing with in terms of research activity is about, I want to remove this, just, this is not working. But I can see it, okay. Okay, does it bother you, or? Because
because I don't see it. It doesn't show on.
Okay,
on
so just
screen.
1 second.
Yeah.
I'm turning. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's go back here. Sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah, so my research deal with developing acoustic and ultrasonic methods for source localization and characterization of complex structure and object in complex environment. What do I mean by complex environment? I mean environment that can be reverberant, diffuse, have multiple scattering, layered, attenuating, anisotropic, and have some temporal or spatial variability. And in such environment, in spite of low noise measurement device, it can be hard to achieve this goal of localization and characterization because of the low signal-to-noise ratio of the target, as illustrated here with Dory, who is looking for Nemo. And I want to develop methods that are accurate and robust, but I'm subjected to three main constraints: the a priori information, experimental implementation, and computational cost. If we have many a priori information, we are more likely to have some model-based method and likely to have an experimental implementation that is cheap. Then if you have a few a priori information, then you're more likely to develop database method, and the experimental implementation, because you need more sensor, can be very expensive. And the computational cost will depend on the complexity of the structure or the environment. And the goal will be to develop methods that don't require any a priori information, with just one single sensor that can provide you information in real time and use few resources. But of course, that's not the reality. And what I'm trying to do is to propose some strategies of localization and characterization that can find the best trade-off between these three constraints, given the available a priori information, optimize the configuration measurement and the calculation. And this is performed in the context of non-destructive testing and structural health monitoring underwater acoustics. And the problem that I'm addressing and that I will talk about today is about localizing a source, and here that's a change of parameter in a complex environment. This can be either using an active setup or a passive setup, and the change can be either a variation of parameter in the environment, local or extended variation of parameter, or moving scatter. But I will not deal with this scenario today. I will just deal with this scenario. And what we are doing here, we are measuring some field at the receiver and looking at the variation of this field between two states of the structure. And what we want, given we will address this inverse problem, given the field that we are measuring, the variation of the field that we measure here, we want to go back to this variation of parameter. And if there is a variation, then this term will be different than 0 at the location of the change. And if not, it will be 0. And to do so, we need to invert this data, and using a forward modeling that need to be accurate for the description of the environment complexity. And I will talk about different strategies to have this model here. And so here, what I'm doing, I'm assuming that I have a small change. This means that you have a low signal-to-noise ratio, but at the same time, we can use perturbation approach. And this allows me to have a linear mapping between the variation of the field measured at the receiver and the variation of parameter in the structure. This means that we only consider the single interaction with the local change, which means that we are considering the direct path here in green, the multiple interaction with the medium, but this perturbation approach will neglect any multiple interaction with the local change that is represented here. This is okay for many applications, but we'll see, I will show throughout the presentation that there are some cases where it can be problematic. If we have many a priori information, then this operator L we can use a model for that, a numerical model or analytical model. And we can have an almost full modeling of the environment, but it can be problematic if the change is close to a boundary because we can't neglect the multiple interaction. So that's the first thing that I will talk about in the next few slides. And if you have no a priori information, so we are describing the environment from the data, but this needs to be manageable from an experimental point of view for the implementation. And also we are dealing with low signal-to-noise ratio, especially when we want to localize in an ambient noise environment. And then finally, if you have a few a priori information, so you have some information from the physics law, you have data, and the idea is to construct a surrogate description of the environment. And the question is, what is the ratio between the data, how to combine the data and the physics, and what is the ratio between the two? So I will talk about that in the third part of the talk. So first, I will just start to present the formalism and the method that is underlying the topological energy method. That's the one that I'm using for achieving the goal of localization, and then match field processing. And then I will present some strategies that were developed for weld inspection based on model-based approach, then data-based for local damage localization, and then combining the physics and the data using a surrogate modeling. So let's start first with some explanation here of what we are looking for when I'm talking about the variation of the field. Here we are looking at the differencing field. That is the difference between the field after the change has occurred and the field before the change. And if we look at that, here you have a representation in the time domain, you have a change here, and that's the representation of the differencing field. And what we see is that the variation of parameter act as a secondary source. And what we want to do is to backpropagate the residue here back to the source. So this is, and the source, that is the change of parameter. And this is a time reversal. And to do so, we are using the framework of the topological energy method. Actually, that's the adjoint method. And this is related to an optimization problem with this cost function, where we look at the bias between the measurements at the receiver from a potentially damaged structure and the pristine structure. And then what we are looking at the asymptotic development of this cost function. And thanks to that, we will get the Fréchet derivative, which is the gradient of the cost function with respect to a variation of parameter. And this gradient, actually, this is what is used when we do the optimization, iterative optimization with a steepest descent algorithm, for example. And what is interesting with this Fréchet derivative is the fact that the maximum, if this value is non-zero and maximal, this should give us information about the location of the change. But right now, with that, we can't do anything. So we need first to derive the expression of this term here. And to do so, we use the adjoint method for computing the Fréchet derivative and invoking the Born approximation and reciprocity principle. After some mathematical development, we see that this Fréchet derivative is the product of the adjoint field. That is the solution of our problem when we have adjoint with the adjoint source here. That is the residue, which is the variation of the pressure field measured at the receiver and time reverse, multiplied by the forward field and with the actual excitation of the signal. And then there is also an operator here, and this is related to the type, it's associated with the parameter M that we are studying. Here, in the example that I will show later, we are in a pulse echo configuration, and we are considering variation of impedance for longitudinal waves. And in that case, this operator is the divergence operator. So at the end, we are looking at the first iteration of the Fréchet derivative. And what we are doing here, we are taking this expression, but we with absolute value here. So this is not physical at all. This is just for adding more robustness to the process. But still, it's come from this formulation that is physical. And the output of this expression here, that is a topological energy, will give you, should be non-zero at the change location in theory, and zero elsewhere. So this will give you the location of the variation of parameter. from a practical point of view, it's implemented as follows. You have the reference structure. You perform some measurement here. Then the inspected structure will put potentially a defect or damage. You measure the field at the receiver. You compute the residue. And then from a numerical model, you take this residue as a source. So you propagate this field. So it's just a simulation. This will allow you to get the adjoint field. Then you multiply this by the forward field. You will perform another simulation here. And then you just apply this formulation. And if you are in an infinite media, then you will have a plot like this, that is the ambiguity surface, that gives you a probability of occurrence of the defect. And that is follow this expression here. And that's an example we performed in this location. So the nice thing about this approach, it has a good performance in terms of peak to noise ratio and resolution. And this approach accounts for the synchronization between the source and the change, and from the receiver to the change. And it's well suited for broadband signal. If you have narrowband signals, match field processing that only account for the synchronization between the receiver and the change may be more appropriate. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. So what is match field processing? Actually, this is a generalization of beamforming. And this has been developed first for active source localization. And this is a method that is widely developed in underwater acoustics. So I will explain this from the point of view of active source localization and then from the point of view of defect localization. And here, what we are looking at is at the correlation between some data that are measured here at the receiver from an actual source here that we want to localize. And we compare this data with a model, it's also called a replica, between measure at the receiver between every candidate source location. And if the model here, when you're here, is looking at the same location as the actual source location, the correlation will be maximal. And if not, it will be it won't be maximal. And it should be it won't be maximal. So the max of this function will give you the location of your change of your source. So there are different type of processor. So here I just introduced this with the simplest processor that give you an output in function of frequency. So we can add up the result over incoherently over frequency. So that's what we call the incoherent processor. You will get this kind of image here. And then if you have the coherent processor, what you do, the result of the correlation is added coherently over frequency. So that's another way. If you have a coherence between frequency, you can exploit this and have a better resolution and peak to noise ratio. And there are also higher resolution processor, like music processor here, where you want to separate the signal space from the noise space, and then you implement some process based on the noise space. And this is a high resolution algorithm. And there are also some other adaptative, but I won't talk about this processor today. Now, what we want in our case is to localize a change. And remember, a change acts as a secondary source. So we do all the same, we follow the same framework. The only difference here will be the data here, and that the data will be the residue that is measured at the receiver. So the whole approach is the same. And so I've talked about the match field processing. This match field processing is also related to the topological energy method that I have talked about just earlier. And especially it's related to the adjoint field. So the adjoint field that I talked about just before was the field where we applied the convolution between a source signal that was the residue, that is time reverse, with the Green's function of your medium. And in the frequency domain, that's the formulation that you get, which is the same as this. So match field processing and the hadron field are related through this relation. And then in the case of the incoherent processor, where we add up the output of the Bartlett beamformer incoherently over frequency, if we use the Parseval theorem, we see that the output here of the incoherent processor is the energy of the hadron field. So that's also another way to compute this in the time domain. And so to summarize, what will apply today is I talked about the conventional topological energy that I will apply, and also the match field processing here. That's a Bartlett incoherent processor, but there are also the other processor just for comparing them. And what matter here is we have a model here, and this forward model can either be determined from physics, from analytical or numerical simulation. So that's the next part I will talk about, from data or from data and physics. First, I will then talk about methods that are where the models are based on the physics, and that was applied for welding and inspection. For one of the projects that we had in the context of inspection of nuclear power plant, we were interested in inspecting the welding structure. And as you can see here, you have a picture of a welding structure. It's an anisotropic environment. And so you can't use a simple model for this. It's also attenuating. And what we want really is to localize a crack. And here, so I say crack, but we are not localizing exactly a crack. It's a slit. So we start first with something simpler. Having a calibrated crack can be very difficult. And this is an extended variation here. And if you apply some method, like a total focusing method, this is a Daly and sum method, you won't be able to localize a slit here. And so that's why we wanted to apply the topological energy method. But one thing is this method doesn't handle very much multiple reflection from the boundary. So we need to filter out this contribution. And to illustrate that, that's an example for what will be the result of conventional topological energy as I presented this to you. For localizing a hole that is close to the boundary. And in this case, you have multiple interaction that we can't neglect. And in that case, you're not able to localize it. So the approach is to say, okay, let's filter out these multiple interaction with the change. So the idea here is to say, we are conducting measurement in a sample with free boundary condition. And also measurement with free boundary condition or when it's a reference sample. And then we will perform two simulations of the forward field, one with a rigid boundary condition, one with free boundary condition. And we will sum up the two of them. And this way, as these two boundary conditions as a phase shift of pi, some of the multiple reflection will cancel out. And by doing that, we do the same when we compute the hadron field. By doing that, we will filter out some of the multiple interaction. And then the rest of the process will look at the product between the hadron field here, the new modified hadron field, and modified forward field. Yes?
How fast is the simulation? Is it computationally expensive?
So here it's a simple environment here. So we use ComSol. So how fast? I think it was few hours. Yeah. Like 2 or 3 hours, 2 megahertz. Yeah. And yeah, it's in 2D. So we did the calculation, the measurement in 3D, but it's in 2D. So if you do it in 3D, then it will require a lot of computation.
Explain that experimental setup a little bit. Which is your data source and which is your sensor source?
Oh, this is a multi-element. There is, so this one is 128 elements. So we just took the first here. So you have 64 element array, and one is, you have here we will send the signal everything at the same time on our element. So it's like a pseudo plane wave, and then we measure the field that is coming back. So it's a pulse echo configuration, if that's the question. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, please feel free to interrupt me. And so now we want to apply this for welding inspection. So in this case, we had access to multipass welding, parameter of multipass welding from the EDF. So this is the equivalent of SDG in France. And we had, that's a multipass welding, and each domain, it was divided in a domain where the elongation axis of grain was similar. And for each domain, it was the same material with this elasticity constant. So this way we could perform a simulation with COMSOL because we knew the parameter here. And what we did was to perform two sets of measurements, one at position A and then another one at position B. So there was the same array as I showed before. And unfortunately, we couldn't drill the weld, the welding. So we had to build a numerical signature of the defect with COMSOL. So that's how we constructed the damage signal here. And by doing that, then we applied the work process of the modified topological energy method. We were able to localize the source. So there is still a shift. We have some experimental noise. And the localization was achieved with a peak to noise ratio of about 6 dB. Next step, once we did that, so we want to move toward the localization of a slit and then a crack. So we work with another multipass welding, and this one we had the reference we have the reference welding structure and also welding structure with a slit in the middle, very thin. And so we did the measurement on it, and as you can see, it didn't work. So then we did the experiment with we had the experimental results. Then we did the simulation because with experiment you have a lot of uncertainty to check if it was really due to noise or not. And we got the same results. So then we looked at the energy distribution of the field. If okay, sorry, there is actually here there is the array is larger than you have here. So if it's smaller, you don't have this this part here, but inside it doesn't change. And what you see here, there is an area where we don't have energy, and so the slit is right in this area. So the solution that we proposed was to say, okay, let's add some internal virtual source inside the medium numerically, and see how try to insonify these areas that are not insonified. And what we did was to propose this approach. You add some numerical source, you look at how it will insonify your area, you measure it here at the receiver, and then you time reverse this and you use this real signal as your new actual signal, and you redo the whole process. So it's a selective focusing. And by doing that, so these are numerical results. We could see the tip of the notch, the slit, and also we had this here. So we didn't know if it was it really due to the slit or because it's shifted, or was it due to the or is it some artifact? And if you do this with only a hole, you see that we can do the discrimination between a slit and a hole. So there's still work going on here. And the big challenge is to do it with experimental, to test this with more experimental data on actual welding structure. but still the results are encouraging, and we propose some improvement for handling multiple interaction and low SNR. And so that's what one of the strategy that was used for that we use for model-based method for defect localization. And then now I will just talk about some data-based approach for local damage localization that use match field processing. And in the context of shell inspection in diffuse field, and then in the context of passive monitoring and database reduced order modeling. Here, the motivation for this work was to detect damage in an immersed structure using the ambient noise generating during reactor vessel operation using off-contact sensor. So the ambient noise can come from either from acoustics, from vibration, so from different origin. And we started to address this problem with an ideal problem where we address first so you have cylindrical structure. So we address this by looking at 2D cylindrical shell immersed in water and filled with water. And first, when you have acoustic solicitation, so ambient noise. But that's just the first step. Then you have many steps to reach this configuration that is very complex. And the hypotheses are that we have a random noise excitation, and ideally we want to have a diffuse field. We have many sensor in the near field of the cylinder, and the position of the sensor is none. And we have only a partial knowledge of the structure and medium parameter. So that's why we use a data-based approach. And we have a small change. And I didn't write this here, but it's a thin shell. In this context, what we will do, we will apply match field processing. So here, that's a Bartlett processor. We create a model with data, that's the residue. And the model is built from the data with receiver in the near field. But as a structure is excited by ambient noise, we can't take directly the pressure field that is measured at the sensor and use it directly as a model or perform the subtraction to get the data here. We need to perform a correlation process for extracting the Green's function for the model and the data. And this is based on the fact that we assume that we have the field here is a diffuse field. So here, what you do, you measure pressure field here at this sensor, you compute the correlation, and you average over mini realization of the field. And at the end, this will allow you to get the imaginary part of the Green's function. And that's first Green's function will be your model. Then you do the same with the damage structure, and then you compute the difference. And this will give you the data here. And after that, we have all what we need, and we can apply Bartlett, the match field processing. And here, that's an example of a result that of application where we had local change that consists of variation of density and Young modulus at theta equal pi/6, and we applied the coherent processor and current processor. So we don't have that much differences, and they have about the similar performances. That is a peak to noise ratio of about 6 dB. And so these results are pretty encouraging. Just I want to mention that here in the nuclear reactor, the radius of the structure is much larger. So we did it, it's like a scaled version of it. Here we have a database localization method with full description of the medium in a passive setup. But there is still an inherent mismatch between the actual environment and the replica is the model, because what we are already looking is what is at the surface of the shell, and here we are measuring what is just off the shell, but we are in narrow field, so this is still a good approximation. there is still some experimental validation that need to be performed, and it requires many sensors. And so given that, we would like to have maybe less sensors. So following that idea, just before, we also assumed that the structure was excited from using acoustics. And here, I had a similar problem that I studied that was also for passive change localization in a vibrating structure. And in this case, the structure is excited is excited through mechanical excitation. And here the motivation was to monitor a change of parameter in a submarine structure in the hull. And the hull is excited, is vibrating because of all the activity that is happening inside, and you have point of connection that are where you have the loading that are applied to the hull. So that's the problem that we are dealing with. And from an academic point of view, we describe this problem this way, so it's simpler, but still, we have the main phenomenon here. We have a cylindrical shell with a receiver sensor around, and the loading points are here, and we want to localize this change of parameters. And same as before, we have some hypotheses where it's a thin shell with a small change, partial knowledge of the structure and medium parameter. Here, the position of the sensor and contact points are known. We have a sparse set of sensors at the shell surface for performing the localization. And the excitation by the substructure is random, so we don't control it, but we assume that we can measure it at these few connector points. And that's a very important assumption. And here we follow the same approach as I talked about before by applying match field processing. And the question is, what do I use for data and model? For data, we look at the difference field would be the difference between the field measured for the damage structure and the pristine structure. But here still we have a random and not the excitation is not known. So we have different signals. So we can't perform directly a subtraction this way. So we have to know the source term. And so first strategy would be to say, okay, we have the direct measurement of the loading with a force cell. That way we know this, we apply the convolution, and we can get the Green's function. Or, which is more realistic, we have an indirect measurement of loading. So which is either, so here would be like displacement or normal vibration, the velocity or acceleration, and at the loading point. And then if you do that, after applying the convolution, you get the Green's function. And what your data here will be the variation of the Green's function. For the model, we will use reduced order modeling from data using experimental model analysis. So I will explain this here. Assuming that we are in the model region, the Green's function between any points at the shell surface could be expressed in terms of the summation with the modes. And the pole here that are the comprise the resonance frequency and the damping ratio. So the idea is to perform upfront some experimental model analysis, then estimate these three parameters, and then once you have these three parameters, you can reconstruct the Green's function for any source position and receiver location. And there are many approaches for performing experimental model analysis. And here I just use some standard approach, but there are some other approaches that could be more efficient than this. So that's one thing that we are also working on. So once you have that, you can construct a model. So here I will illustrate what I just said with some experimental measurement that were conducted on an aluminum plate that was excited by a shaker and fixed at its edge. Actually, we try to have it fixed, but experimentally it's hard to have something that is exactly fixed, and measurements showed that it was still moving. The plate was excited by a shaker at 3 successive positions, and the change was an added mass. we tested different mass and for 2 positions. And the vibration of the plate was measured with a vibrometer laser. And so here we had only a partial knowledge of the plate physical parameter, so we couldn't use simple analytical solution and either a numerical model. Even if it's a plate, it's not simply supported. And so that's why we wanted to use a database database approach. So you have a view of the back of the plate with the 3 source position, but just one source at a time is working, and later on we'll do with many sources working all together. And the source signal was a white noise. And for building the model, so this is could be performed only once or a few times, whatever. But with the laser, would did measure the field at this grid point. And given that, we could apply experimental model analysis to estimate, perform the model identification, and then reconstruct the model of the Green's function or the frequency response function. Here we had a 6 set of measurements, so I just combined all of them, but we could do also this with just one. And what you have here is just a comparison of the synthesized Green's function or frequency response function reconstructed from the either model parameter from experimental model analysis in red and in blue. And the red one is the one that is measured. And that's the best fit and the worst fit. And the worst fit were observed at the limit here and where you have low signal. So given that, we have our model, registered our model with 30 modes. We then apply the matrix processing localization or algorithm. So that's an example with 16 sensors. This process is applied at many frequencies, but not at the resonance frequency, because at the resonance frequency, the vibration of the plate doesn't depend on the source position. So we apply the process between resonances, and then that's the result that you get if we have direct measurement of the source term. So that's the incurrent process. And here we see that we are able to localize it, but the signal to noise ratio, the peak to noise ratio is not very high, and also the resolution, because we are pretty low in frequency. So that's the process itself. We are considering a range where we can get better resolution. And then if you do some other algorithms like music process, you will get a better resolution. But this process, we have to be careful because it adds an extra step where you have to choose some threshold and say, okay, I will separate my signal space from the noise space. So you need to say, what is this threshold? So here I said, okay, I just consider remove just the first eigenvalue, but this means that you know something about your data, and sometimes you don't know that. So we have to be careful with this. And then the same process is performed when we have an indirect measurement of the source term, and we are still able to localize this, and with the incurrent process, which is not, in terms of performances, this one is better, but this one is much more robust. I did also the setup, and this one is much more robust. So we were able to implement this approach from an experimental point of view on a plate in air for a local damage localization. And now there are still work going on for the experimental validation in water and other geometry. And there are also some improvement that we have to still look at. And so I have a few minutes left. And before moving on to the last part of my talk, I want to talk about using a surrogate modeling from physics, law, and data that we could use then for either matrix processing or topological energy. And the idea would be, the idea would be to use physics-informed neural network for constructing a surrogate model. So that's the last part that I've been working on, and also I've been working on it with Professor Capriotti and master student Tommy Stone. And that's an example of physics-informed neural network architecture when you want to solve a wave problem. So here I'm just in a, it's not a, yeah. So you have an input here where the input layer here has the spatial coordinate and temporal coordinate. And then the neural network here will allow to map the input to some output. And this output view should be like the field, for example, in this case, and it's totally differentiable. And to have this correct mapping, there is a loss here that will be computing and that will constrain the estimation of the coefficient of the neural network that can use either, that can use the data here and here the physics. And this is actually the initial value boundary problem, initial value boundary problem. And the challenge first in this configuration is for the pins. One of the big two main challenge is to properly define the weights of the term of the training loss function, because this will condition your convergence, and while a proper normalization and non-dimensionalization of the physical parameter and the equation is fundamental for that. And then there are still work going on this topic in the community. And also the pins don't like, there is a spectral bias, so pins don't like sharp variation of the field, which means either parameter discontinuity or analyzing higher frequency. And Fourier encoding, I think a layer here of Fourier encoding could help. And what we want here, what we don't really know, we may not know the initial condition, the boundary condition perfectly. So very often we have access to the equation, to the partial differential equation of a problem that we are solving. So the idea is to, even the data in the PD, can we use the data for compensating for this loss of information? And that's the question that we are trying to answer, and how much data is required for predicting properly the field using the pins. So first, let's see what we get if we know all the physics. So no data, and in this case, it's an initial boundary value problem. We are a finite element managed to solve this problem. So we are able to solve this problem. And at this step here, the pins, it's already kind of not that easy to have a proper convergence of the data of the simulation. And we see that at early time, we have the error is lower, but then when you go further in time, so here you have a mismatch that is that there is a stronger mismatch, and it can be way above 50%. So you can do anything with that. And if I'm doing simulation for a longer time, so for a longer training, we can improve that, but still, that's one already of the difficulties. But we will compare early time. So then, what? I think I have two slides here. Okay, I did transfer learning, so we have better results. So then the idea is to say, okay, we don't have boundary condition, we don't have initial condition. Can we still have some result with the pins here? And if you do that, so actually you already see the picture here. So we have few sensors here, 16. And obviously this is not enough to replace the missing knowledge of the initial boundary condition and initial condition. So by initial condition, I mean, either you know the source term or you have two snapshots of the full field at early time. And so we don't have enough data in this case for compensating the unknown physics. And the question is, what part of physics should be compensated by data? What is more important, boundary condition or initial condition? And actually, this is the initial condition, because in this case, we don't have boundary condition, same setup. And we see that we get better results, but still it's not complete. So we should have more data. So that's these are qualitative observations, but we are trying to understand it better. And so what is already show is that the data of physics, the two-law convergence, the data of the physics constraining the structure of the field is important. So you can do this either by using a data at a dense set of points for 2 times or simulation. But data is hard because you need plenty of data here, like 1,000, or simulation. But simulation, you may not know all the parameter. Or you can have the data at the source location, and this will limit your number of data. And that's what I will illustrate with the 1D example. We did a 1D example because it's much faster in terms of convergence. So you have a string here, an excitation, it's a random noise. And it's fixed at both ends, but we assume that, okay, we don't know it, but we will have data close to the end, data here, and then 2 sensors here at the excitation. You need to have 2 sensors so that you know the direction of the field when it will propagate, so it can be close to each other. And if you do that, and then the PD will be just for constraining the field at this portion, but not at the location of the data. And by doing so, we got quite encouraging results. So you have the true field, the predicted by the pins, and then the difference field. So still there are progress to do, but we see that we have a structure that is quite similar. And we see that here, I don't know if you don't see it, but this error here is due to the fact that there is some filtering and due to the fact that to spectral bias. So, but we don't see it well here. Okay, so the pins have great potential for surrogate modeling because of the instantaneous inference and the fact that we have a continuous function. We started to perform analysis in time domain, also in the frequency domain, but there's still much to do in terms of training, in terms of stability, accuracy, and the training time is big, I think, a big concern also. And we have to perform more analysis on convergence of the pins with respect to the ratio between the physics and the data. So to finish, just a small summarize, I've presented some strategies that for model-based and database method for change detection and localization. We assume that the change, it's a small change so that we can use perturbation approach, and we use the adjoint formalism to derive the topological energy method and match fit processing. And then once you have what you want is to extract the change signature, we do it from differencing between 2 states. But there are also alternative approach like interferometry, correlation, or singular value decomposition to separate the noise, the space, the signal, noise and the signal. And then what would be best is to have baseline-free approaches, so like in nonlinear acoustics, but these pose some other experimental difficulties. And once you have the change signature, you correlate this with a forward modeling of the environment. And that can be either physics-based or database or combined physics and data modeling. So that's what we want to do. Okay, that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Okay, do we have questions from the audience? And also the audience.
Sorry. Okay.
You want me to leave the microphone? Or...
No, I will turn on my microphone.
If you have questions, the people on Zoom, please raise your hand and we'll hear you.
Yes, I have a question.
In conclusions, so you have these 2 approaches that you proposed. This is the conclusion slide is from go to the next one.
Previous one or next?
Next 50. Yeah. So wasn't clear. So you have 2 approaches. You can use the topological energy method and the match field processing approach. So do you have a sense of when it's advantageous to use one versus the other?
So the topological energy method will account for the synchronization between the probe and the change, and the source and the change and the receiver. So if you have a broadband signal it's more appropriate. And also, if you have not too much reflection, then let me just there is a scheme here. Where is it? Then if you have where it's at the very beginning here, yes, this here. So which means that somehow you're trying to have the field, here. You're compensating for the phase shift between the source and the rest of the channel and the change. Then if you have multiple interaction, let's say you have plenty of them, even here multiple interaction. The match reprocessing might be more appropriate because it can account for any interaction here, and in this case, it's more appropriate. And also, if you have narrowband signal, because when you write this in the frequency domain, and if you don't, this could be advantageous. And also, if the frequencies are not coherent between each other, then match reprocessing will be, because you have the possibility to apply incurrent processor as opposed to the topological energy method that exploit the whole coherence of the signal. So that's the
typically a large field problem that your source detection, if it's closer to the boundary, is being more sensitive to those multiple interactions versus if it's inside the domain.
yeah.
Right? So it looks like even this within the same problem, some method will work better inside versus boundary. Am I correct in this?
Sorry,
So if the change is closer to the boundary,
yes,
then the match field work seems to be a better approach because you'll have more
Yeah.
interactions.
Mm.
It's not just what you want, but where the between also, right?
yeah, that's where the domain is. If you so what you're saying is, okay, you have a sample and let's say you have a defect in the middle and then one at the edges, and if it's in the middle, maybe the topological energy will work better as opposed to if it's at the corner, we will use match reprocessing. Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
You know,
Yeah.
people do this with multi surrogates, right? So you ascribe confidences for it based on the closeness to
Yeah.
boundary, and then use a probabilistic prediction of where likely it is.
Yes.
So you can combine the two is what I thought.
So I think there are in terms of different cases. If you have let's say you have a very broadband signal, so it can be well resolved in time. In this case, let's say you are close to the boundary, then yes, we may see this different. But if you have a narrowband signal, even if you're in the middle, because it's as if you transmit, you have interferences, and in this case, maybe match reprocessing could be more appropriate. But then, of course, there is a region where you're in between. It's not very narrowband, it's not very broadband, and in this case, yes, you're right, and we may have to try both actually.
Thank you. Professor Lanza here has a question, and then I'll give you the word.
Yes.
Yes, hi, Sandrine. I have a few questions.
Wait, Professor Lanza, just a second. Okay.
Okay.
Could you repeat, please?
Yes, no, thank you so much for the presentation. I have a few questions. So on this slide that you are showing now, where you do the baseline subtraction. The first question is, do you just subtract the RF waveforms in the time domain as they are, or you do a different subtraction? Do you just subtract the time domain signals, the RF waveforms?
Yeah. The question is, am I doing directly?
Wait.
The question is, am I doing directly the subtraction between the two signals here, right? That's the question. In this case, yes. And these are two measurements. And it has
Yeah,
to be
no.
measurement. You could also have the reference field here could be just a simulation, but if you do simulation, it's not working.
Okay, do you have experimentally some residuals that are left if you reposition the array, on a baseline area, defect-free versus then the defected area? Have you seen that like residuals be left over that and then or not, or you don't have this problem?
So I'm not sure I haven't understood the question, but you're saying if I have looked at the residual between two pristine states, right?
No, it's just if you reposition experimentally, we see in our case that a lot of time the RF waveforms, they don't perfectly overlap because you may have different coupling, and so you may be left with some residuals.
Yes. Okay.
It's not a perfect.
Yeah, of course. Totally. It's not perfect overlap. Still, you always have noise, experimental noise, and but here, what I would say is the scattering from the defect was still stronger and somehow coherent than this noise level in this experiment. But if let's say you have a scatter that is less strong, you may not be able to find to extract the scattering from the defect. And of course, we were also very careful with performing the experiment. You try to not moving your sensor, otherwise, yes, it's sensitive to the position of the sensor, the coupling, and all this stuff.
I have a related question. Related question. So this is very good. We're trying to do something similar, so that's why I'm very interested in hearing your experience on this. Have you tried to do, instead of a baseline subtraction like this that requires the acquisition of the baseline, as you said in your conclusions, have you tried to do eigenvalue analysis and project out the strongest eigenvectors to highlight the secondary source?
Yeah.
Have you tried like that?
Yes. So there are different ways of doing that. So let's say you just have just one set of the data on the inspected structure. So you do you just remove the first eigenvalue, and here it's tricky because if I'm in an infinite medium or far from the boundary, this could work. But then when I have some interaction, I have more than one eigenvalue. So we tried this and it wasn't working. Either we remove too much signal or not enough. And depending on the position of the defect, so we go back to what you're saying, it's too dependent on the location of the defect that we want to guess, but we need to know it upfront. So it was difficult. And then the other approach is to say, okay, we have, that's something that I'm still looking at. We have still two measurements, but we are trying not to perform the subtraction directly with the raw data because of there's this phase, you can have phase issue. And we do a central value decomposition of the reference medium, on the data from the reference medium from the inspected structure, and then we try to project out the signal of the inspected structure on the reference medium, and then to remove the first eigenvector. And I haven't obtained still a good result with that. But there is a paper from Claire Prada where they try to do that. And they obviously got some good result for tracking a moving target. But on my side, it wasn't working.
Okay, do you mind giving this paper detail to Professor Capriotti?
Yeah.
If you can give it to her when you're done,
Yeah.
and then she send it to me, because I'd like to see it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
I think the feedback is with the both microphone.
Ah, yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We had another question.
So about the weld, how do you figure out what the domain of the weld is to be able to solve the?
So you mean, let's say, here, for example. So the question is how I figure out the domain, like why should I use this or this? That's the
Yeah,
question?
Yeah.
Oh, so here, what we really wanted is to inspect the whole welding structure. So we knew that we wanted to inspect this structure, and so we wanted to inspect this part. So maybe there's something that I
that part of the question. How do you figure out that that is how the weld is, if that makes sense?
So if you go back to the previous image, right?
Oh, you mean this?
Very clear boundaries of the different crystal orientations or the
Yeah.
grain orientations.
Yes, yeah.
That requires you to do a destructive inspection, cutting of
Yeah.
bending and forming. But on a welded structure, that could itself change as process conditions.
Mm.
So when you showed me the slide first, I thought, oh wow, she's going to tell me how to get those boundaries from her NDE. I was
Okay.
super excited.
That's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, that's tough. We are just starting, and here the thing is, we assume that we have this knowledge because we are on the side of the people who are doing it, so they know exactly where they did the welding. So yeah, the assumption is to say, of course, you don't want to do destructive testing. So the assumption is to say that it's isotropic transverse, and that one section will give you roughly what is in the other section. So that's a very strong assumption, and so
But it doesn't look that anisotropic, right? If you look at the properties you're assigning, C11, C22.
I mean, the word thing, because here you have a different orientation,
but-
so in that sense,
Properties.
but yeah, this area here is, they are all homogeneous. Isotropic.
Is this like a typical welding structure? Like do welds typically behave like they change?
Yeah, it
They
depends
change
on
a
the number
lot.
of passes. But these research, they have there are more specification of what kind of welding they want. It's a very it has to
Controlled.
be, it's very controlled. So we were like relying on that. But yes, we have variability, and we haven't proven that. Okay, this is this give a representation of the whole welding structure. So yes.
So when you do your forward model on this, do you pick up all the reflections on these boundaries? Because they are mismatched.
Yeah.
Properties will get lot of reflections, right?
Yeah, but where is it? We could see the yeah, okay. It's not that's the distribution of the field, but the contrast is you have reflection, but they are not as strong as like free boundary condition or other. And even the modeling, it's still an approximation, because here we said, okay, this is a welding structure, you have this domain, but as you mentioned, here it's nice, you can decompose. So this work was performed by hand, you can decompose into mini domain, but there are to do that, you need to be a very good at welding, and then you can have the frontier here. You can see some boundary, but it could be more fuzzy. And in this case, yes, it's tough.
So given that, would you say pins would be good? Because with pins, you still don't have the condition.
So yeah, I mean, I have a mixed opinion about pins, because they say, okay, pins in theory can handle many type of problem, but then when you start to work with the pins, then you realize, okay, I just changed this parameter. Oh, it's not converging. Oh, I need 1 week for the training. So in theory, yes, but still, you still need to inject some knowledge of the physics. And if you don't have enough data or you don't have the physics, I think whatever method, it won't work. So you still need to have some knowledge. But yeah, we'll see.
Other questions? Sorry.
Can I ask one more?
Sure, Sachi, go ahead.
How extendable is this approach if you have multiple sources of damage?
For the damage, so I think
That's a hard problem, right? Sometimes when you have close, but multiple, sometimes it shadows the other.
yeah. So when you say multiple sources, you mean multiple defect, right?
Yeah.
Change. So here, either you can have, let's say you can have an extended change or mini defect. If the defects, there are different cases. If the changes are not, you don't have multiple interaction between the changes because the contrast impedance is small, or the contrast impedance is small, then you will be able to apply this and localize the different defects. So I have maybe a picture that will answer this. Where is it? No. Okay, no, I don't have this here. But yeah, let me go back to this. I remember where I was. Yes. So if you have, let's say you have two holes, for example, one is here and one other is here, you have equivalent energy, you will be able to localize those two because they are far from each other. Then if the two holes are too close from each other, what will happen? Either you see them because of the resolution of your probe, you will see just one hole, and then they go away. So that's one thing I've been doing, not with this, but within the forest of rods, and I was moving to scatter, and I could see that at some point it will, I could separate them. But then if you have too much interaction, you will see some other point because we'll see some artifacts. So that's, there is still some limitation. And let's see here, you have a hole here and one here. So this one, because you don't have the same, the same amount of energy, you will see this one, but this one will be less visible. So it will mask the other one. So you need to play with normalization.
Thank you. Okay, unless there's other questions, I think we can thank our speaker. Thank you, Sandrine.
Thank you.
And thank you to the audience. Thank you to the audience on Zoom. And have a good weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good weekend.